Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another intelligence briefing with the S2 Underground. Now, right to begin with, many of you might have noticed that this briefing is not live. This is not a live stream. This is a pre-recorded video. And this is for two reasons, or a couple of reasons. For one, my personal schedule right now is not very conducive to doing this particular briefing live, or at least at a time of day where most people would be able to watch it. And two, these live events people seem to find that it's difficult for them to find afterwards. So if you miss a live briefing, it's not very easy to find it on our channel. And it's difficult for us to manually upload to other sites like Odysee and things like that. Whereas a normal video seems to reach many, many more people. And that's really the goal, I suppose. And on top of all of that, we can easily see if YouTube is going to censor us when we upload the video. We get little flags on our end if things are not like fit for advertisers or things like that. And so, yeah, if we did a live stream that YouTube, didn't like, they would shut it off and we would lose all of that footage and it would just kind of be wasted effort, right? So in the interest of continuing to speak freely with kind of one of my more spicy briefings, we thought it would be a good idea to just try putting this out as a normal video and see what happens. So this video may seem to be live, as I have instructed our editor to edit this as little as possible, which he was all happy to oblige me on. So fear not, as usual, this briefing will be complete with all of my own unique speech patterns and general lack of professionalism. So with that out of the way, let's get right to it with the weather. So, as one can see, weather for the American Southeast, really the whole East Coast, and a significant portion of the Midwest is going to have really low cloud ceilings over the next 12 hours, which is really great for avoiding things like visual surveillance, or at least surveillance packages that are going to be available to lower levels of authority, right? Like we mentioned in our recent synthetic aperture radar video that we put out, certain assets can punch right through weather, so it doesn't really matter. However, most of the time we're talking full motion video, just a normal video camera on a really expensive drone. They're going to have trouble seeing through clouds. So for those of you that have been asking us in DMs and emails and things like that, why are we talking about the weather? Well, this is kind of a taste as to how normal military briefings go down. Normal military operations briefings almost always start with the weather, and then they push over to S2 to do the intelligence part, and then push forth into operations and things like that. So that's why we're talking about the weather, just to get people kind of used to, hey, maybe looking up and saying, realizing, hey, this is really good surveillance weather if I were to be surveilled, or looking up and saying, hey, the clouds overhead, probably not going to be surveilled today. So that's why we're covering it. Also, just want to briefly mention on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can see that the lunar illumination this cycle is 7.8%. So we are in what's called a red illume cycle, meaning it's going to be dark. Dark outside at nighttime, more dark than normal because the moon is going to be very, very dark. So this means that if you were using night vision devices outside, you're still going to have trouble using them in a lot of areas, particularly if you have cloud cover. So if you've got really strong cloud cover and really no moon, no lunar illumination, it's going to be hard even with some very nice night vision goggles to be seen. So something to keep in mind for planning purposes and just to get people in the mindset of seeing weather. Also, likewise, moving forward over the next 18 hours, these are where your clouds are going to be. As you can see, overcast skies in the Pacific Northwest, right on the coastal region, basically where everybody lives, and also in the American Northeast. So the New England area is going to have a lot of cloud cover as well. Really spotty stuff throughout the rest of the American Southeast and the American Southwest. So yeah, there you go. Low-level clouds are going to be in, mid-level clouds, and as you can see on this slide, higher-level clouds as well. All right, so enough about the weather. Let's push forward into NOTAMs, and this is a short one. Nothing really major to report. I did see that there were a couple of VIP ones, a couple of presidential ones for the president or vice president moving to their homes for the weekend. So didn't really feel like putting those on the slide because honestly it doesn't really matter because they do that every single weekend. But other than that, nothing really major. You can go check it out yourself if you're in an area where NOTAMs might be of interest, but I didn't really see, nothing really caught my eye as being important for at least the next couple of days. Now, of course, NOTAMs change, right? So, and we don't do these briefings every single day, right? So chances are, if you're reading this, if you're watching this after it, premiered or after it went live, you're going to want to check just to make sure nothing popped up 5 minutes after this briefing was over. So, because NOTAMs come and go very, very quickly. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about with NOTAMs, don't worry. We have a specific video on NOTAMs on our channel, so check that out, and that will explain everything about that. Moving forward into the civil unrest forecast, made a little bit of a change to this slide. As you can see, California and New York are kind of scary red right now, and I did want to put that, highlight that on this particular slide, because we are seeing, since those two states have instituted a passport system for the V word that we cannot mention on YouTube without being censored, we're starting to see a lot of resistance to that. Maybe not enough to matter, certainly not enough to change the way these totalitarian states work, but enough to be like, I need to be aware of what's going on. So if you're in California or New York, make sure that you're aware of any demonstrations going on or things like that, because you might have trouble navigating. Now, granted, the types of people that are going to be, the demographics that are going to be protesting against a passport system are not the kind of people that will drag you out of your car and beat you to death in the street, unlike literally all these other cities that are on the slide. So that's something to keep in mind, but just wanted to throw that out there, that California and New York are they're not in a great place right now, but as we all know. So there you go on that. All the other states, no major change, pretty much status quo for how violence is skyrocketing in most American cities. So there you go on that. So yeah, that's pretty much all we have for civil unrest forecast. If you're in a major American city, you already know this already. So there you go. Moving forward into logistics. So right to start with, I'd like to mention that the chip shortage, the global semiconductor computer chip shortage, is still very severe. It's gotten worse, but it's also gotten slightly better in that electronics manufacturers are starting to retool to work around it. So they're innovating around the problem, which is good. But I'm not entirely certain. I'm certainly not an expert on this. But a lot of people aren't. It's quite clear that this retooling is not going to be everyone's savior. For instance, Samsung just announced, I think today or maybe yesterday, that they are launching an internal investigation to try to figure out what's the deal, because they're reporting quarterly losses due to sales dropping due to their prices going up. So there you go on that. Also, Apple is reporting the same thing. Apple is projecting that they're going to not have losses so much as not have as many gains as they were expecting in the next quarter due to this chip shortage, driving prices up and things like that. So, and driving availability down. Also, as we can see, a lot of red dots on the slide today. The water shortage out west, as quite literally everyone has predicted months ago, the shortage has gotten worse. It's becoming a reality. It's coming into fruition right now. So if you're located in any of these affected states, but especially California, I personally would be pulling out all the stops to make sure that you have a way to stockpile a good amount of water, a way to collect rainwater if the government officials don't arrest you for trying to collect rainwater, like they will in California, things like that. Because as we have found out from the recent sort of communist overlords that control pretty much everything in states like that, when emergencies happen, like legitimate, genuine emergencies, not ones that are planned, right? But like things like natural disasters, when they happen, they're so much worse than we ever could have expected because of the way this situation is, right? So it's also important to remember that California did shut off utilities to people who were accused of violating social distancing mandates last year. They shut their water and their power off. So, again, as with most things in today's presentation, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not even a conspiracy. This is undeniable history. We've passed into history. This stuff has already happened. This stuff has actually happened. So we're not even talking about preparing for things that might happen. No, we're talking about preparing even more for things that have already happened, right? So water is going to be on everyone's minds out in the West moving forward. It really depends on how these other states control things like the water flow in the Colorado River. It's hard to say how this is going to turn out, but I can guarantee you that the politicians in some of these more totalitarian places like California will seize every single opportunity to restrict water as much as they can. So there you go. And if they need, and this is the perfect excuse for them to do so. So there you go. Also, in a similar vein, but not quite nearly as important as drinking water, is the liquor shortage in Vermont, North Carolina, and Ohio. So for those of you that don't know, all three of these states, I believe, I know North Carolina and Ohio are. I don't know about Vermont. They are ABC states. So the government, the state government, there is a commission called the Alcoholic Beverage Commission where government controls the distribution of alcoholic beverages, which is almost certainly the root cause of this liquor shortage, right? Because after all, we know how state control of the means of production work out. So sharp increases in demand, which is what this is supposed to be, allegedly from news sources, which, how trustworthy are they? The word on the street allegedly is that demand for alcohol in these particular states rose just like every other state in America, but because they have ABC mandates, you can't just go to any normal store and there's no liquor store on the corner. It's going to be an ABC store that's government run, owned, and operated, and the government orders the amount of alcohol. They don't understand how, and they're not able to keep up with a capitalist system like buying and selling goods and services, right? So, of course, systems like this fail when demand increases sharply. But honestly, even I know I've been to all three of these states, and I can tell you that even just on a normal day, they're probably going to have shortages. That's just how the system works, right? In those three states. So there you go. If you're in Vermont, North Carolina, or Ohio, you probably already know about this. But this is a little taste for those of you who don't, like us, don't live in those states. It's interesting to kind of observe how that works, right? Also, briefly wanted to touch on plastics. I don't really myself understand a whole lot about this, but the sort of tweet headline soundbite is that plastics manufacturers and the makers of composite materials and things like that in the Gulf states are having a hard time producing those plastics and composites. The article that I'm sourcing for this is a very interesting article from a market research analyst in that field. Highly technical. Well, it's not really that technical, but it's technical enough to where it's worth a read. So check the sources slide out at the end of this briefing if you wanted to read more. And bottom line is I don't know how this is going to affect the rest of the country. I'm not really seeing it. None of us here who have helped me kind of look out for shortages on this have really seen plastics being in short supply. Like we saw last year with plastics from China being in short supply, like the packaging, plastic and sort of foam packaging shortage during COVID last year. Not really sure how that's going to shake out here in the United States. It might not be severe. It might be really severe. But I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention and to, encourage everybody to go read that article because it's interesting. Also, something that is not nearly even worth mentioning, but I thought I'd mention it anyway, is that Starbucks places around the country are having trouble with their inventory. So things like syrups and artificial sweeteners are in low supply at random places around the country. I can't really get a beat on where it's at because it seems to be kind of random. Which makes sense for a franchise that sends their supplies, through different networks and things. I don't really know much more than that because I don't really support Starbucks at all. And let's be honest, the demographic of people that would get on Twitter to scream about how their soy latte doesn't have enough Splenda in it is also the kind of people that, would make a mountain out of a molehill. So I don't know if this is genuine. Or if this is some sort of indicator for how things are going to go for other restaurants or eateries or whatever in the future. So just wanted to point that out there. Who knows? Not really that interesting, but there you go. All right. Pushing forward into critical infrastructure concerns. So this is a critical infrastructure slide. All four of these things are really nationwide, so I didn't really put them on the map. And the first one is something that I'm going to talk about in great detail here in a minute, but I did want to mention that with the institution, with several states instituting or planning to institute or trying to institute passport controls, for medical passport controls, right? I would be willing to bet, this is just kind of like one of those analytical hunches, where I would be willing to bet that in the very near future, we're going to start seeing medical care and food services being denied to people who don't have such a medical passport, right? That's exactly what's happening in New York and California. The places that are being targeted are food distribution centers. Places where you can go get food are the number one places why this passport system is being instituted. You control the food, you control people's access to the food, you control the people, right? So it kind of makes sense. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. But sort of in a similar vein, I did want to mention that as sort of a personal anecdote, which has almost zero analytical value, but I did want to share that inflation, at least in our local area here, where both I myself and a few of our staff members live here in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, inflation is most definitely a factor. Just to give you a personal anecdote, I know this doesn't really mean jack at all, especially from an analytical standpoint. One person's story doesn't really matter. Is that I went shopping for groceries 2 weeks ago, and I went shopping again today, and I paid double, almost exactly double the price for meats, all meats, and beef, chicken, and pork, and almost double for certain kinds of vegetables. So that's concerning. I paid more for groceries today than I have in my entire life, and my needs have not expanded at all. Sure, every time I go shopping, I try to stock up. Prepping in the long term, right? Make sure you get just an extra can of everything, right? So we're not talking like I'm going out and buying, tens of thousands of dollars worth of groceries. I'm just talking about like a normal, family's worth of groceries, right? And it was double. So that's kind of shocking, very shocking to me, even though it's something that literally every single person with a fourth grader's knowledge of economics understands. So just keep that in mind. I know a lot of people right now are kind of freaking out on the interwebs, talking about food shortages and things like that. But I just did want to share my own personal anecdote of inflation and how it is most certainly a thing moving forward. So, yeah, not super great. I know this might not be a thing. Again, one person's story is probably not indicative of the rest of the country. But if for anyone out there who's in a similar boat, there you go. You've got your confirmation that it is happening to at least one other person, right? So there you go. Switching gears quite significantly is number 3, which is the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. And this is some quite terrifying stuff, not necessarily because it's anything new, but because of how it's branded. Essentially, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, is partnering with private companies like Netflix, Amazon, Google, other companies like that to essentially spy on a lot of stuff. Essentially, remember how when Edward Snowden leaked everything, everybody was shocked, shocked, I say, to learn that Google and Facebook were collaborating with the FBI and the NSA illegally, right? People were shocked to learn that out. Well, guess what? The Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, which the official press release I have linked in the source documents for this episode, they're touting it like it's a good thing. Like companies are now going to help the federal government prevent cyber attacks. But if you read the fine print, it's basically just they're freely admitting, openly, mockingly to your face that they're spying on you once again illegally. So there you go. And then also switching gears quite significantly as well, there was a report I saw that came out a couple of days ago specifically referencing hospital systems, the digital systems, and the cyber networks and things that are in most North American hospitals. Apparently, this is the statistic grab line from the whole study, is that apparently 80% of hospitals in North America are at, quote, an extreme risk of some kind of crippling cyber attack. Now, again, this is one of those very highly technical documents. I would highly suggest you read the source doc on this, but this is one of those things where you're like, okay, well, no, duh, that's exactly what we could have guessed that. Well, there you go. There's at least some experts in the cybersecurity field are screaming about this now as well. So there you go on that. So pushing forward into significant governmental actions. I've got 2 slides for you today on this. So here we go. First and foremost, again, the source doc of which is in the sources. There has been this is a couple of weeks old, but there has been a significant amount of consternation surrounding the DHS training for mass vaccinations. So here's the skinny. For those of you that have had a history in like I have a history of defense and natural disaster preparedness, things like that. Working for like the county guys or something like that for disaster preparedness. They have these online courses. I mean, you can go online and learn how to be a certified National Weather Service weather spotter. It's free. You take like a 30-minute course and there you go. Stuff like that. One of these courses popped up on one of these websites where you can do this online training stuff, or even physical training that you can register for, in which the training subject was teaching local volunteers how, and other federal, local, state, whatever agencies, how to conduct quarantine operations in rural areas. So obviously people got a lot, very freaked out about it. Honestly, I'm in today's age, I would be concerned about it as well. However, if this kind of thing happened 10 years ago, nobody would really bat an eye, because yeah, of course, you're expecting your county. That's what happens. Think if Ebola, like legit, like a legitimate, highly contagious disease broke out in the United States, you'd expect some kind of county or local assistance, right? Maybe not everybody, but at least that's what governmental agencies are supposed to be for. I know that's kind of an oxymoron at this point, but point is that this exact training course, if it were to have appeared online 10 years ago, nobody would have batted an eye. But because of what it means today, with everybody, including ourselves, being very concerned with soldiers kicking in our door in the middle of the night to shove a needle in our arm, it doesn't look very good for the Department of Homeland Security. And considering the Department of Homeland Security is a complete joke now, as really they have been for, since they were created, it's very concerning. So there you go on that. I'm not sure if I'd be at panic level over it, but I just did want to point that out, that did happen. Also, when it comes to election stuff, Twitter, good old Jack is back at it again, purging several accounts that were covering and exposing the inconsistencies, I'll say it that way so that YouTube doesn't ban me, the inconsistencies in the election audits of Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Georgia. All 4 of those states, which, by the way, are having some very interesting things coming out about them that I don't really want to delve into, because I don't really know how. I think it would take a lot of time to dig into that, and then we'd probably just get banned anyway. But there's a lot of people talking about it already, so it's not like it's being ignored. Conservative Twitter and conservative sites are really putting it right at the forefront. So go there if you want to learn what's going on with the election stuff. Third, I just wanted to have this kind of on record for when social media and really all media kind of forgets this happened. But Cuomo has gotten in quite a bit of trouble. Even his own attorney general released a report against him. Basically, the report that was released that confirmed that the sexual harassment complaints against him were in fact true. And even the federal regime is saying that he should resign. So very interesting stuff. I'm sure we'll probably see something in a few days, but I would be highly surprised if he goes away that quickly. CNN is interestingly refusing to cover the story, which is actually not that interesting considering that his brother is a CNN reporter. So there you go. Also, number four, the White House is now openly censoring social media. So this happened a few weeks ago as well. The White House, through their press secretary and basically through a lot of their spokespeople, is now clearly, openly, and not even trying to hide the fact that they are ordering social media websites to censor their enemies. This came out when it came to during a press conference. In which the White House press secretary confirmed that they were directing Facebook to delete certain content from their platform. So there you go. If you didn't take anything away from this briefing, I feel like this briefing has like 5 or 6, like every bullet point in it is like, that's that's not good. And yeah, this is one of those where it's like I'm talking about it quite casually, but it could not be more serious. So yeah, there you go. White House is now openly censoring social media and directly ordering them. If that doesn't show you that media, all media in the United States, is now working for the federal government, I don't know what will. So yeah. And also number 5, this is an interesting one. And the universities are requiring the medical procedure that shall not be named, right? Now, this is interesting. This is how they're doing it. I've seen this in a few different universities, a few different people who are sadly college students right now and kind of can't get out of it without having to pay back a lot of either student loans or something like that. They have sent us a lot of information, and oh man, this is so sneaky. So what they'll do is, for those of you that don't understand how college works, I hate to be condescending, but there is a registration period, and then a period goes by. It depends on what university it is, but you register for classes, then classes begin, then there's a drop date for classes. So what people are seeing is that the universities are waiting for the registration to complete, and then they're saying before the semester even starts, hey, we're not going to mandate masks, we're not going to mandate any of this stuff, we're not going to mandate medical procedures and things like that, to get students to register. And then once students are registered and or past the drop date for the class, they're saying, oh well, now we're going to mandate masks for everyone. Oh, now we're going to mandate you get an experimental medical procedure. That kind of stuff. So they're waiting until students are financially obligated to finish the term or else lose a significant amount of money and potentially void their student aid, federal aid, and things like that, so that they can control them. I think that's just completely dastardly, but it's genius. It's like a genius in how evil it is. But it seems like most universities are trying to do that, is because we all know how universities work now. So I thought I'd mention that for anybody who's out there who might be a student or is registering for classes. If your university has come out and stated we're not going to mandate this, we're not going to mandate that, just watch and see what happens after the drop date for your course or after courses have begun, and the ad drop period has passed, right? So that you can't drop the course without losing your money. Just wait and see what happens. I guarantee you'll be in for some nasty surprises there. So continuing on with this series of significant governmental actions, keeping in theme with the experimental medical procedure that shall not be named. Number 6 here is what the military community has been talking about and rightfully freaking out about for a while now, which is the Secretary of Defense seeking approval to mandate this experimental medical procedure before it's FDA approved. So yeah, soldiers everywhere who have a heart and realize what's going on are freaking out over this because they really have no option. For those of you that don't understand how the military operates, you have no choice. The choice is either get out of the military and accept an other than honorable discharge, or maybe even a general discharge, or some kind of discharge for refusing to get a medical procedure. Like I personally know a lot of people who got kicked out of the military for refusing to get the flu shot, and that's a shame. that the military is like that, but that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, service members are put in a very bad choice between having to choose between two very bad choices. So I did want to mention it because it is going on, it is happening, and for posterity's sake, I just wanted to have it on the record that this is the day that we're talking about it, essentially. So there you go. Switching gears quite significantly, but still keeping in the theme of significant action, is Apple has decided that they are going to be scanning your personal photos. Yeah, even more so than they already do. Now, I did put this here because Apple is, according to the other bullet, which I just briefed, that companies are now starting to partner with national defense entities. You now see why Apple is now considered by us to be the government. Now, Apple is doing this under the guise of something quite noble. They are pretending to develop this technology and institute it on iPhones to scan a person's photos and determine and detect and report child abuse and illicit content like that. However, as literally every single human being on the planet can obviously see, that's most likely going to be either a lie, or two, a diversion to be able to spy on your devices, even more so than Apple already does. So there you go. Yet another reason to avoid smartphone usage as much as possible. So, something to definitely keep in mind. Keep your eye on it, because Apple loves sneaking these things in. All tech companies love sneaking these things in. So there you go. All right. Number 8 is something moving back to the military category. The military has announced that they are stockpiling 500 million doses of this experimental drug. Allegedly, now this is from an Army Times article that again is in the sources for this. Even the Army Times, like based on their the way it's written, maybe I'm biased and I'm reading between the lines when there's nothing there, but it seems like whoever wrote the Army Times article is even thinking that the Army's excuse that, oh, these are for international use, like they're going to go to people in Africa. Even the Army Times writer thinks that's BS. So yeah, it's most likely going to be used for something more nefarious than simply helping out another developing nation. And combined with the military lust, or the senior military lust for going door to door, yeah, well, we can put two and two together quite quickly. It doesn't really take a genius to figure that out. Now, as far as, again, on the freak out meter, how much to freak out, I wouldn't necessarily completely freak out just yet, but I mean, geez, there have already been like 8 things I've already talked about in this briefing that are worth freaking out over. So I don't know, take that for what you will, I guess. And another one of those freak out things is number 9, which is the Michigan Air National Guard in upcoming exercises will be intentionally closing a highway and a public highway, an interstate, and using it as an improvised landing strip. Now, the military analysts out there will tell you that this is not necessarily a bad thing. This is kind of a national defense thing. It makes a lot of sense to be able to train and things like that for foreign invasion and stuff like that. Here's the deal, though. Out of all of with every single state's National Guard reporting funding problems, right, to where they can't even get very basic infantry training level skills and things like that. We cannot even develop basic soldier skills. Why then is the Michigan Air National Guard, of all places, the National Guard for freaking Michigan, right? Why are they training to land on an improvised landing strip? Oh, by the way, which will be the very first time in U.S. history this has ever happened. Yeah, interesting. I don't know if this is more as nefarious as a lot of conservative sites are making this out to be, but I do think that there's something fishy going on. Either somebody's trying to dump some funding so that they can get at the end of the fiscal year, which we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year, right? So they're trying to dump some funding so that they can get more next year, or they're just incompetent, or some general wanted to get their pet project across and made a deal with the governor for more funding. Who knows? Or it could be what everybody seems to think it is on the internet, which is something nefarious, training for the American military to target Americans, which we think is a thing, but I'm just not sure if this is going to be a representative situation of that. I don't know. But I did want to mention it. You can research it on your own. So yeah, there you go on that. And then for number 10, I made a mistake. I made yet another mistake on these slides. There's a mistake in every slide. I put the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative on there twice. So I already talked about that, so we'll just go ahead and skip that last one because I already talked about it. Now, moving forward into what we get asked a lot. Understandably, a lot of people out there are asking, at what level should we be freaking out, or something like that, or what kind of concern should I have, and things like that. Like, I cannot tell you how many, like, I'm sure the guy who mans our Instagram account just gets bombarded every day. I know when I check our email account, we get bombarded every day. And don't get this wrong, we're not trying to say don't contact us. We're just saying that a lot of people are very upset, and I completely understand it. I really do. I'm very upset. But here is where I wanted to spread a little bit of optimism, okay? And I wanted to do that via this sort of format. And we can do this with a lot of different issues, but I just wanted to show you how I'm trying to think about things when I see something really gargantuanly bad happen in the news or something like that, and I think, oh my God, the end is nigh, right? This is the thought process I go through. So I go through a 3-step thought process for a lot of this stuff that I see that's just horrifically bad. First of all is what happened, okay? And second is what would, if I were looking through the lens of a totalitarian dictator, if I wanted to be king emperor of the universe, what would I have to do in order to make that original thing more effective, right? And lastly, I think because of those mistakes, how can I take advantage of a person who isn't as effective as they could be? So here, let me run through the first one and show you what I'm talking about. So what the regime did was recommend masks slash the experimental drug that cannot be named, right? So they've recommended it, okay? They haven't mandated it yet, right? They haven't mandated it yet for citizens, okay? So what a totalitarian dictator would need to do in order to get compliance is mandate that stuff immediately for every person and go door to door and make sure that it happens, right? And that might happen one day. Every day that goes by, it seems like we're creeping towards that. But right now, we have to admit that if resistance to this kind of stuff is possible in the first place, if they're giving us a choice, right? Recommending is coercing, but it's not mandating, right? They're giving us an option, right? And if that's possible, then it will lead to resistance in other areas. If they were to come out and say masks and the experimental drug are mandatory for every U.S. citizen to get, your resistance would fall sharply because people just don't see a way out. Well, now they're offered a way out. People are offered a way to not participate in that. And since that happens, that resistance can spread to other areas. So there you go. They're just not as effective as they can be, right? Same thing with coercing people into staying inside, right? Stay indoors, save lives, right? Yeah, all that BS, right? Well, here's the thing. They're just coercing people, right? They're tricking people. They're using propaganda and things like that. A totalitarian dictator, in order to be fully effective, would have to order this at gunpoint, like in Australia, right? People are literally having to show their papers to their police to leave their freaking houses, right? That's what would have to happen in the United States, right? And since that's not happening, we can take advantage of that. Every minute of freedom that we have is a minute of freedom that we have to stockpile, collect intel, prepare for the lockdowns for when the gunpoint does come, right? If that does happen, right? So there you go. We can take advantage of that, even though it seems like that first event, right? The government's coercing people into staying inside their houses. Well, we can turn that into a positive thing without too much effort at all, just by looking at the other side of the coin, right? They're not as effective as they could be. Likewise, this is for the military guys out there, purging the military of dissidents. Like, we remember, hey, the U.S. government is now looking at your Facebook page, soldier. That's how it works, right? Well, here's the thing, though. They didn't purge everybody. They did not purge every single person in the United States military that does not agree with the regime or senior military leadership. In fact, quite the opposite has occurred, right? Whoever is left in the military, right? There's only a handful of people have been kicked out of the military for being quote unquote extremists, right? I.e., they liked the wrong thing on Facebook and their command found out about it, right? The majority of the military that's left, right, is now covertly operating with the same beliefs that they had before. So now they're getting used to operating in a covert environment. They're getting used to hiding their beliefs from their command because there you go. And if they're willing to hide their beliefs from their command, they're willing to hide other beliefs from their command. You see how that works? And, you know, in classic fashion, right? Classic U.S. history, right? The U.S. military has created more adversaries within its own ranks than it has stopped outside its ranks, right? So there you go. By trying to purge but not being completely effective, right, which is not something the regime could have done in the first place, right? By purging just a few people, they have ticked off everybody else, right, or mostly everybody else, and now they're underground, right? So there you go on that. Likewise, with the thing that everybody's concerned about is infringing on gun rights, right? The regime has, of course, infringed on pretty much every human right that there is, but especially gun rights. But, what a totalitarian dictator would have to do, right, in order to be fully effective is literally a surprise raid on every single human being who owns a gun in the United States at the same exact time. Right, it's going to have to be coordinated at every level. Federal, state, local, and even like sub-local groups would have to be coordinated to all strike at once to get every single gun, right? This is not Australia, where you can have a gun buyback program and every person in the entire country shows up and gives up their guns willingly. This is America. We don't do that here. Granted, there are a lot of, you know, FUD types out there that would gladly hand in their guns because daddy government told them to. The fact of the matter is that the resistance to this kind of stuff has never been stronger than it is today, right? So the interesting tidbit that a lot of people have mentioned, this is not just, you know, me trying to be an internet, you know, professor or anything. The interesting part that a lot of people have noticed is that the regime has infringed so much that ordinary people who don't who think that, you know, some gun laws are good and things like that, those people are now openly and regularly violating laws. You know, just a couple of years ago, people would be terrified to even have a stock and an AR pistol in the same exact room because they were terrified that the ATF would raid them and say, you have the capability of doing so. Well, you know, now the vast majority of gun owners simply ignore most gun laws. So there you go. I guess the moral of the story for talking about this particular issue is that every single day that goes by, and this middle column here, right, this list of stuff that a totalitarian dictator would have to do, every day that goes by and this middle column doesn't happen is a day that we can use to our advantage, right? So that is a bit of good news. I know that not a lot of time we don't talk about good news a lot, but it's really important to keep things in perspective, keep things grounded, and stuff like that. And up next is something that I wanted to talk about because this is something that I just, you know, on a whim one day created because we kept getting a lot of DMs for this, and you're going to get a different answer if you ask every single person here, what books would you recommend? So I created on Goodreads a reading list. If you're interested in learning more, or you want to figure out where to begin, or if you're interested in the field of intelligence or military history or things like that, if you want a list of books to read that I think would help get us out of the situation that we're in, this is where you need to go. Now, I will be the first to admit that I do not like this platform since it's owned by Amazon, but it's the easiest thing to use. It's able to catalog our books here. The literally stacks of thousands of books that we have here in our shop. It's really easy to transfer them over to this platform. And most importantly, you don't need an account to view the books that I've dropped on here, which is nice. I would also mention that this list is far from really far from complete. I've only got a couple hundred on there so far. I'm trying to progressively add books as I can get to them, and add specific shelves for specific topics. Um, so yeah, like I mentioned, we're often asked what books we would recommend for people that are new to the field of Intel and stuff like that. So we've got a specific list for that, And if you got the basics down and you want something a little bit more advanced, well, we've got a higher level, more challenging, advanced Intel bookshelf as well. So check it out if you're interested. We are always reading new books here, and though I'm really the main person who is adding books to this list. Most of our staff here is constantly sending me books to add to the list that I either totally forgot about or even haven't read yet. So I will completely and be grateful for any books that anyone can recommend. I'm absolutely opening the floodgates and requesting that if you've got a book that's really good and you think is very handy to know, please send it to us or drop it in the comments below. We've got a channel on Keybase and I think Element as well for reading list recommendations and things like that. So that would be very, very handy so we can add to the list. So yeah. And pushing forward into international issues. The bottom line is there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and I did not have enough time or the bandwidth to find the hundreds of things that are going on in the world to add to this slide. But I will briefly mention that the Chinese nuclear power plant that's leaking is still leaking, and shocker, it's leaking worse than what they told us. Surprising for communists, I know, right? And a lot of experts are now warning that it might actually melt down. I don't really know about that. I think that the Chinese would absolutely sacrifice their people in order to make sure it didn't melt down, because a meltdown is something that's hard to keep within the confines of state control, especially with Western media having an eye on it. But who knows? We might wake up one morning and see a plume, but I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Also, France. France is not letting us down with their massive anti lockdown protests, which are currently underway in the country. They know how to do it right. The French have really, people knock the French for, well, being French, I suppose, but they really know how to protest. So I think it's been kind of entertaining to at least watch some of the stuff they're doing, and it's very helpful to know that at least some people in Europe are willing to resist. So that's very good to know, because Europe's dealing with a lot of stuff right now. So yeah. Also, Iran. If you wanted to look this up, Iran has allegedly hijacked another oil tanker. There's really not much information on this right now, but the United Kingdom, that's why I have the same bullet for each one, is that the United Kingdom is heavily involved. A counter-piracy company in the United Kingdom is heavily involved, trying to say, hey, Iran just stole another oil tanker, we think. Now, in a few days, we'll probably know a little bit more, but it would not surprise me at all, considering Israel has been very, very much all about targeting Iran shipping oil to Syria. So it would make sense that Iran is having to confiscate or hijack more oil tankers so that they can. That's just what Iranians do, right? The Iranian regime, I should say. And then finally, the United Kingdom is in some hot water of their own, because apparently there are mass food shortages and resource shortages in that country, which is being blamed on Brexit. That sounds about right, to be honest, because of the logistical complexities that come with Brexit. If you haven't been following Brexit, it's too much to get into right now, but just suffice it to say that people in the United Kingdom are reporting shortages of pretty much everything. Either it's a legitimate shortage or there's a driver shortage because of Brexit. Certain people aren't allowed to, drive for things like that, and food is, rotting in the fields and things like that in a few select areas. So yeah, not super great for the UK. It's not. I would not classify it as quite an emergency level yet, but it is interesting to see that food shortages are most certainly a theme on the international front at this time. So before I ended today, I just wanted to do like a little mini podcast and take a minute to check in with everybody and see how everybody's doing. And really just to say, keep on keeping on and to try not to let things get to you too much. Like I mentioned earlier, pretty much everything in this briefing today is worth panicking over, even though we're not panicking. It's just people everywhere are getting burned out left and right, and I find even myself, well, especially myself, just without the energy to view things as they really are anymore. In a lot of cases, there are a lot of dudes on the internet screaming about this or that these days, and unfortunately, a lot of them are right. Yes, we are living in unprecedented times. Yes, our government is legitimately trying to use communism to usher in totalitarianism or whatever. It certainly seems like it, right? Things are not going super great right now. We're not confused as to what's going on, right? I think most people know what's going on to some degree, right? At this point, anyone who doesn't even see the tiniest bit of what's going on, I can't help them. Like none of our staff here can help them. There's nothing we can write. There's nothing we can produce that can help people like that. They are beyond saving at this point. Yeah, at least at this time, right? It may change in the future, but it's unfortunate. Um, at least the effort required to help a person dig themselves out of the ideological hole they've dug would be disproportionate to the number of people that we could help, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you go back and you listen to a lot of our previous content, really mostly our original OG podcast, you'll notice how much we've all changed. We here try to be as analytical as possible. Neutral will be the wrong word because neutrality is what journalism is supposed to be. And we're not journalists, right? Analysts are supposed to use their skills and experiences to advocate for a certain course of action. That's what analysis is, right? And the very definition requires that analysts be continually at odds with each other. A team of analysts that all agree on everything, all the time, that's a worthless team, right? Now that means that you might have people, this doesn't apply just to analysts like us, but normal people as well. So you might have people who have different freak out points, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, if that makes sense. Like for instance, if I see a bomb disposal technician running, right, I'm going to break human land speed records to beat, them to wherever they're going, right? Well, we all remember people freaking out over stuff that I personally would not have freaked out over. Concerned, sure, but freak out, I don't know, in the past. But then the question becomes, well, what do you do when you do hit your freak out level? Like, for instance, in my own mind, I have far surpassed my own thoughts on what is actually possible almost on a daily basis. I look back on so many things that have surpassed my own freak out level, like, the election shenanigans that, again, I can't talk about because YouTube will ban our entire channel. I never would have guessed that that could have even happened. Like, there's just simply too many checks and balances in the system, right? In fact, one of the very first research projects that I ran as an undergrad in college was on the topic of, election F, if you know what I mean. And my own personal research very strongly indicated that if, elections were to be tampered with, a long laundry list of planning and coordination would have to happen. But here we are, it's 2021, and it happened. So I never thought, I'd see National Guard soldiers going door to door or military checkpoints being set up on U.S. soil either. Oh, and, just FYI, for those that keep wondering why I keep mentioning that in pretty much everything that I narrate for us, is because one, I cannot put into words how strongly I feel about that for reasons of either, lacking the vocabulary to do so and also for Fifth Amendment reasons. But I also mention it because I don't want anyone to ever forget that that happened, ever. So, considering all of what's happened and considering my own thoughts and concerns, a question comes out. That question comes back. The rhetorical question, which I keep asking myself, is what do I do when my own freakout point is surpassed? And I don't have an answer to that, though it's something that I have been thinking about myself for weeks now. Of course, there are people that will say that, the B word that cannot be named or something like that, that's the solution, which again, I just don't think. No, I don't think. I know that will not result in what its advocates think it will. I've talked at great lengths about why that's a horrendously bad idea that serves principally, really, today to strongly indicate the intelligence level or lack thereof of those who advocate for it. So, really, that's the most use it has in today's world, I think. Um, but some others would advocate for moving that freak out line, moving the goalposts, or even they might not even advocate for this, but they might do it subconsciously, which, I know myself, I've been conditioned to at least a little bit, based on the way that the world has become over the past couple of years. But sitting in a house that's on fire and saying, this is fine, well, that's just bonkers to me. Um, and others, like yourselves who are watching this, might say, well, it just means that we must work even harder to keep moving forward. And that's the closest I have come to an answer to that question, because this is the right move and it allows us to have different answers at a later time. More options are always better, especially in a world where the US federal regime is trying to reduce one's options to only a couple of choices with everything. Either support wokeism or you're a racist bigot, right? Either support the police or defund them. Either let the government pump experimental drugs into you or be a social outcast, right? Join the party or you're a dirty peasant, right? See how they love reducing options? That's why I and the rest of the staff here think that if we were to have any chance at saving not just our own nation, but the rest of the world that is counting on us and depending on us, we have our work cut out for us. And that work is mostly the boring stuff that very few people stick around to listen to, which is why we're trying to do our part to help people better themselves, thus, things like the reading list and such. One of the most deadly weapons we have to eliminate tyranny forever is critical thinking. And paradoxically, critical thinking can't be taught. Like, it can't really be taught at all. But we can teach people how to write. And writing is no different than thinking. But in order to teach someone how to write, we must first encourage them to read. And that's why we must prioritize reading over most other things. Understandably, reading takes a long time. And in today's age, there are some seriously great ways to learn valuable information very quickly. YouTube is a great resource for this. As much as we hate YouTube, they really are a great resource for this. However, we must remember that it is this condensing of information that is the reason for a lot of our problems, right? Whether it's a spending bill that's so long that mathematically it would take years to read and research it, or if it's someone with a political motive summarizing history for you because you didn't want to take the time to learn it yourself, we have to remember that the true benefit from reading a good old-fashioned book is not just the knowledge that you learn, but also the journey to get that information. And since this isn't a live session, I can't answer your questions live, but if you leave a comment, I will absolutely answer whatever questions you might have as best I can, right? I don't have the answers for everything. I don't even have the answers for most things, but I'll do my best. And again, a special thank you to our supporters on Patreon and Teespring. I know we say this a lot, but your support really is what's keeping this organization going at this point. So words cannot express how grateful we are for you guys and gals out there. So a special thank you once again to everyone who supports us in that way as well. And here are your sources for this briefing. The PDF, I was going to say the PDF will be hosted on our website, but WordPress just censored us and deleted our website. So there you go on that. But you'll be able to find the download link to this PDF, which will be hosted on pretty much every platform we have that we can actually upload PDFs to. So there you go for that. Sorry we can't drop links in the description. I know that would have probably been a better idea, but YouTube doesn't like links, especially links that are counter to their own political narrative. So if you want the link, get the PDF, or otherwise you can type it in, even though that's a little tedious at times. So there you go. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this video format worked out very well. I'm not really gonna know if it works or not until we see it go up on YouTube. But yeah, thanks again for sticking by, and thanks again for all of your support. And we will absolutely see you guys next time. And always remember to fight in the shade.